Why is it important to involve employees in setting goals? And how can you do that? Let's talk 2025 goals. And if you hear that and you're like, 2025 goals, I'm just focused on closing out 2024. That's okay. You're probably in really good company. And a lot of organizations even have different fiscal year ends, like January 31st or June 30th, or all sorts of them. But a lot of times, when we talk about goals, the thought about employees is how do we communicate those goals? It's not about the actual goal setting part. Now, you may also be watching this and think, okay, but I don't set any goals. I have goals given to me, and I have to give those to my team. So ideally, leadership at the top of that organizational level that's setting those goals, that may be cross-functional, like you may be looking at a board or CEO, finance, operations, HR, all sorts of operations and different functions. Those people that are making those goals, it's important to take a step and remember that the people are the ones that are going to have to achieve those goals. And those people will have a lot of emotions and questions, and how they feel about goals can greatly impact how successful you are in achieving those. So at the outset, as much as possible, if you have the opportunity or in the position to influence how those goals are set, it can be helpful. Some ways may be, hey, can we have some members of the team that are involved in those and thinking about considerations that we may not see from our position? That can be helpful. Or whether it's asking your team, hey, as we're setting goals, what are things that are helpful to know? And from employees, especially those that haven't managed people or don't understand like a P&L, a budget, that the dollars for raises and salaries and all of those things have to come from somewhere, those people don't always understand the process. And so people are like, make the quotas as low as possible and incentivize us. And those natural, especially for like sales roles. But in thinking about anything with goals, no matter what the role is, whether it's sales, account management, whether you're looking at an IT call center, and you say to that team, oh, we need to be able to answer 50% more calls in an hour. Okay, maybe that's because someone above you in the board or so told you to do that. But your team isn't going to be able to do that in isolation. So as much as possible, thinking about how are we getting the information from the people that do the work and bring that into our goals. So especially as you're in middle and senior management, you may have that opportunity to think, okay, how can we involve those considerations? And again, whether that's bringing team members into some of those conversations or asking managers, hey, can you talk to your teams as we think about goals? What are things that they think that we should know? And you may hear things that are frustrations on the part of employees, and part of that's natural because again, they're the ones doing the work. They may be seeing the hard things. And so as a leadership team, if you look at that and immediately discount that of like, well, they don't understand, they might not. But it's also important that you may not understand aspects of their work. And so that flow of communication, like so often people talk about performance feedback and a feedback loop on how people are doing. But it's incredibly important for those in management and senior leadership to get that feedback and information from their teams. So talked about setting goals. Let's say you're a manager and you're like, that would be great. I don't know how to influence that. And some is just saying to senior leadership, are there opportunities that we can get the perspectives of those that will do the work to make sure we consider that so we can achieve them better? Why that can be helpful is it's not just a situation of like, my team feels like they don't understand anything about goals. Like, okay, they may not. But by saying it in that way, you can at least position to have an opportunity for them to give input in whatever way that works. And it can be a great ChatGPT prompt generally, or AI tools, of what are ways that team members who aren't in management or leadership can influence how goals are set. That's a way that you can start and think about your industry. You can always follow the rules on organizations' rules on AI. Don't put any company or personal information. But it can be ways that are helpful because you may not have ever thought about involving employees in setting goals. But again, if you are one of those managers that's getting goals, and now you have to cascade those or tell those to your team, how do you do that? Because thinking from your team's perspective, before you have those conversations and you get that goal, are you going to be able to tell your team, okay, this is what the goal is, this is why it's changing, this is how your role may be different, and this is what we'd expect. So is it, if they have a quota, is their quota is higher? Are they going to be seeing higher compensation if they meet that? Or things like that call volume. How are people going to be armed in that call center to be able to have quicker turnarounds other than just hanging up on people? Because that's people's natural instinct going to be if they're solely measured by ending that call quickly or taking more calls. And so thinking about that, So whether it's at getting those goals and you have the opportunity to ask your senior leadership, okay, for my team, explaining the what, why, what, and how of this, I have questions from their perspective. So I want to make sure as I'm explaining it, I'm doing it in a way that'll be successful. And that can be helpful at the outset. So when you're talking to your team, you're not just having that conversation that so many people have, which is, this is your goal, good luck, move on with life. And so your employees are like, oh, and maybe side texting with stress. And so as much as possible, anticipating and proactively telling them, these are what the goals are. I wanted to make sure I understood, what we have and information to help you meet these goals. So this is what we have. But then keeping that, feedback or information loop. What are things that we may not have considered or questions that you have looking at these? And your team members may need some time to digest that. It's often not something they may want to vocalize in a meeting or feel comfortable on the spot. But having this information in these conversations, while it can seem exhausting, and a lot of managers will say, my team's just going to be like, we can't hit this. What are we supposed to do? But framing that part of it, what are we supposed to do? Your team's going to need to know what they can possibly do and get those ideas to be able to make those goals achievable, that they're, likely targeted on, and you as well. And so in thinking about goals, whether it's for next year or at any time, instead of just thinking of that same, pattern of getting the goals and communicating them out and hope all goes well, what can you do to incorporate more employee feedback in setting those goals and making sure that you understand from your senior leadership and communicating that to your team of exactly how those goals can best be achieved? And what does that look like and what are resources? Again, another prompt. In addition to thinking about prompts of ideas of including your team's feedback, also think about if we have an increased goals, what are some ways for X function to be able to meet an increased target? Again, some ways that you can have, in addition to giving that input from your team, that's going to be a really valuable source. But often, employees want to feel and see that they matter and their input is considered. Because when that happens, you can have a much higher success of them hitting those goals and you hitting your goal, and so on. And if you like these tips on goal setting and thinking more strategically, I do have a Manager 101 course. That's our flagship course that includes fundamentals of management, from hiring to performance management and delegation, all of those for all levels of leadership. We also have a course that's Manager 201 on things like just this, on goal setting. When you get information, how do you cascade that? Thinking like an owner, time management, what you can control, especially if you're in that middle management role. And so I'll include that in the description in case it's ever helpful, because that has not only videos, but a workbook, a PDF, and also a Notion template. So you can think about how you apply that and grow in your own leadership.